Cheating wife wanted to divorce me for her ex, mutual friends supported her and betrayed me from now on. You are enemies, be careful, I told every one of them one by one, I wrecked them all, but I saved the best for my cheating wife. I was in my office, going through the latest reports when my phone buzzed. Kyle's name flashed on the screen. That was odd. He usually texted first. I answered, and the moment he spoke, I knew something was wrong. His voice was unsteady, like he was hesitating. Aaron, listen, man. I need you to sit down wherever you are. I was already in my chair, a frown forming on my face. What's going on? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Kyle exhaled sharply. It's Joyce, she's at a club, and you're not going to like this. My stomach clenched. A club? What is she doing? He hesitated. Dancing. I almost laughed. Dancing. Then Kyle's voice dropped lower. More serious. More like public sex, man. She's all over some guy, and he's got his hands all over her. Right in the open. And Paul. Paul is cheering them on. For a moment, everything inside me went cold. Paul, I repeated, my brain struggling to keep up. Yeah, and Linda too. Some of our other friends are here, watching like it's entertainment. I didn't want to call, but I knew you'd want to know. I stared blankly at my desk, my pulse pounding in my ears. This had to be a mistake. Joyce wouldn't. I'm sending you the address. Crystal Globe, Kyle added. A notification popped up on my phone. Location received. I was already grabbing my jacket before I even processed what I was doing. I'll be there. The drive to Crystal Globe was a blur. I don't remember the traffic lights, the turns, or even how fast I was going. My mind was stuck on Kyle's words. The name Paul echoed in my head over and over. He was supposed to be my friend. Our friend. I pulled up to the club, the neon lights reflecting off my windshield. The music inside was pounding, a steady bass that I could feel in my chest as I stepped through the entrance. Kyle was waiting just inside, his expression grim. He didn't say a word, just nodded toward the dance floor. And then I saw her, Joyce. Her back was against Zachary, the same ex who left her in college before she met me. His hands were on her waist, moving lower, their bodies pressed together, moving to the music like they had done this 1,000 times before. Then she turned, and I saw it, their lips meeting, his hand gripping the back of her neck. She wasn't resisting around them. Paul and Linda were laughing, clapping like this was some kind of show. A few of our other mutual friends were there, too, grinning, whispering to each other. Something inside me snapped. I didn't even realize I was moving until I was already there, standing right in front of them. Joyce turned to me, her movement slow, almost lazy, as if she had all the time in the world. Her eyes flickered with a brief hint of surprise at my presence. But it was gone just as quickly. Instead of guilt, she smiled. Oh, Aaron. I lifted a hand, cutting her off before she could spew out whatever pathetic excuse she had prepared. My voice was calm, controlled, too controlled. No, you're not sorry. So save it. I'll give you time to be sorry. The smile on her face wavered, but I wasn't done yet. My gaze shifted to Paul and Linda. They had been laughing just moments ago, cheering her on like this was some kind of performance. Now, they looked a little less amused. I took a step toward them, my voice unwavering. I saw you both clapping like this was a goddamn circus act while that man was kissing my soon-to-be ex-wife. That makes you my enemy from now on. So, you two better watch your step. Paul's smirk faltered, and Linda averted her eyes. Good, they should feel uncomfortable. Then, I turned back to Joyce. How long has this been going on? She lowered her head, her fingers brushing against the strap of her dress. For a second, she almost looked ashamed. But then, in a quiet voice, she answered, 3 months, ever since he came back, I was with him. I exhaled slowly, my jaw tightening. 3 months, she had been coming home to me, lying next to me in our bed, pretending, knowing, what she was doing behind my back. Then she lifted her chin and met my eyes, her expression hardening. I was going to tell you, I want a divorce. I chuckled, shaking my head. No need to bother, you'll get everything you deserve, Joyce, I promise you that. Her lips parted slightly, but I wasn't done. I took a step closer, my voice dropping lower. But hear me, and hear me well. You do not step foot inside my house. Not for your things, not for closure, not for anything. If you do, there will be a lot more that you'll have to deal with. A presence shifted beside her, and I turned my head just as Zachary stepped forward, his posture stiff, his shoulders squared. He was trying to act tough, but I could see the hesitation in his stance. Are you threatening her? He asked, his voice firm. But there was an edge of uncertainty beneath it. I looked at him, stepping into his space, my eyes locked onto his. Yes, I am. I'm telling her not to come near my house. Because if she does, I will invoke the castle doctrine on her. Zachary's expression flickered for the briefest moment, recognition, then caution. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He wasn't stupid enough to push further. The club's pounding music faded into the background as silence stretched between us. I let the weight of my words settle before finally stepping back. Without another glance at Joyce, Paul, or any of the so-called friends who had watched this unfold, I turned on my heel and walked out. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to cool the simmering rage beneath my skin. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. The line rang once before a deep voice answered. Douglas Lima speaking. I took a steady breath, my grip tightening around the steering wheel as I got into my car. Doug, it's me. Aaron, I need your expertise. My wife. Joyce, she wants a divorce, and I want to make sure she regrets ever wanting one. A slow chuckle came through the receiver. Well, you called the right man. And he was right. No one in town was as ruthless as him. Douglas listened carefully as I laid everything out. He didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, he let out a low chuckle. You've already thought this through. I like that. I leaned back in my seat, gripping the steering wheel. The house is mine, bought it before the marriage, so she can't touch it. My business, that's my father's. On paper, I'm just an employee, so it's out of her reach too. Doug hummed in approval. Smart. That leaves the joint accounts. I smirked. Already handled. Stopped by the bank before heading home. Took it all out. You do realize she'll fight for alimony, right? She can fight all she wants. I'll give her what the judge orders. Nothing more, nothing less. But she won't get a single cent before that. Doug chuckled again, this time with a little more amusement. Damn, Aaron, you're more ruthless than I remember. I didn't answer. I was done being the guy who played fair. After hanging up, I made my way home. The house felt different now, like a battlefield I had just reclaimed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, then pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a while. Jacob picked up on the second ring. Well, if it ain't the old devil himself, I smirked. Got a job for you and the boys. Can you be here in 30? There was a brief pause, then a short laugh. Sounds interesting. We're on our way. Exactly 29 minutes later, Jacob pulled up with his crew. A solid group of men I had served with in the Marines. Men who understood loyalty, respect, and, most importantly, revenge. Jacob stepped out first, cracking his knuckles. All right, what's the mission? I gestured toward the house. Everything that belongs to Joyce, I want it packed, dumped outside, and out of my sight. But I want it done with extra care. Update 1. Cheating wife wanted to divorce me for her ex, mutual friends supported her and betrayed me from now on. You are enemies, be careful, I told every one of them one by one, I wrecked them all, but I saved the best for my cheating wife. Always the quickest to catch on, he grinned. You want us to leave a message? I nodded. Every single piece of her clothing, before you fold it, I want to see the imprint of your boots on it. Jacob chuckled. Damn, cold. I like it. They got to work immediately. The house filled with the sounds of cabinets opening, drawers slamming shut, and heavy boots stomping down on fabric. The satisfaction I felt watching them work was something I couldn't put into words. Jose held up her wedding dress, stretching it out between his fingers. Special treatment for this? I crossed my arms. Yeah, make sure it stinks. He grinned, took a deep swig of his chew, then let out a long, slow spit right onto the white fabric. The thick, dark stain spread across the lace like a final mark of disgrace. Then, with a smirk, he unzipped his pants. Might as well add a little extra. I watched as he let out his own personal contribution, his share of urea soaking into the expensive material. When he was done, he wrapped it up and shoved it at the very bottom of the pile of clothes. Perfect, I muttered, a slow grin spreading across my face. Let it stink, just as I had expected. A knock sounded at my door. I already knew who it was. I took a slow breath before opening it. Victoria stood there, Joyce's mother, her face lined with worry, and behind her, like two stray dogs sniffing around, stood Paul and Linda. I didn't even let them step forward before I cut them off. I pointed to the boxes on the porch, stacked neatly but already starting to show the grime of the outdoors. Before you crawl back to your car, pick up those boxes for your bitch of a friend. If you don't, I'll let nature claim them. Paul opened his mouth as if to say something, but I just stared at him. He thought better of it. Linda grabbed his arm, and they both turned back, hauling the boxes away in silence. I stepped aside and let Victoria in. She looked around, taking in the house, the place where her daughter had once lived, now stripped of any trace of her. She sighed, her expression a mix of sorrow and something else. Regret? Disappointment? When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. Before I say anything, I just want to be clear, what Joyce did was wrong. There's no justification for it. No excuses. I crossed my arms, waiting. I'm not here to defend her, she continued, wringing her hands. I just came to say that she loves that man, and she loves you, too. That was it. That was the moment I had to stop her. I let out a short, humorless laugh. If she ever loved me, she wouldn't have gone back to the man who abandoned her. Victoria flinched at my words, but I didn't stop. 5 years of marriage, and I find out I was nothing more than a placeholder. A convenient, stable option while she waited for her past to come knocking. And now that her old love is back, my usefulness has expired. I should be discarded. Victoria sniffed, dabbing at the corner of her eye with her sleeve. I know how you feel, Aaron, but I can't seem to make her understand. I shook my head. There's no need for that. I don't want her back. She's made her decision. She wants to end the marriage? Fine, I'll make sure she gets exactly what she deserves. Her expression shifted, just slightly. A trace of fear. You're not going to harm her, are you? Her voice was soft, hesitant. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, I won't harm her physically, unless she tries to pull something on me. She stays away from me. I stay away from her. Victoria exhaled, relieved. But I wasn't done. But the 5 years she wasted? I leaned in slightly. I will seek retribution, not just on her, but on some backstabbing people who used to call me their friend. Her face fell. She looked away, gathering herself before whispering. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I softened just a little. I reached out and hugged her, feeling her frail form shake slightly in my arms. I'm sorry, I murmured, but your daughter is going to pay. When I pulled back, she wiped a tear from her eye. Then, surprisingly, she smiled, a small, broken thing. I can't undo what she's done, Aaron, but you will always be like a son to me. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I managed a small nod. Thanks. Victoria took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and walked toward the door. Then she walked out. Victoria sat in her living room, the dim glow of the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. A cup of tea rested on the small table beside her, untouched and long since gone cold. She had been thinking all evening, replaying the conversation with Aaron over and over in her mind. Then the front door opened. Joyce waltzed in, her heels clicking confidently against the hardwood floor. Behind her, Zachary followed, wearing a smug expression as if he had already conquered the world. They looked like a pair completely unfazed by the chaos they had created. Victoria raised her tired eyes to them as they stepped inside. She exhaled slowly, measuring her words. "Dear daughter," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I cannot even begin to explain in words what you have done." Joyce rolled her eyes and plopped onto the couch, kicking off her heels. "Oh, come on, Mom, he'll get over it. Aaron's always been the strong, silent type. He'll pick up the pieces and move on." Victoria's gaze darkened. "Move on," she echoed, her voice quiet but sharp. Joyce smirked and leaned back, stretching her arms. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. We'll have him served by next week." Zachary draped an arm around Joyce's shoulders and grinned. "That's right, Joyce gets the house, and half of his business." Victoria remained still, watching them, her expression unreadable. Joyce ran her fingers through her hair, clearly pleased with herself. "Zach and I are going to live in the house. We're making it ours." Zachary nodded eagerly. "And once we get the business, we'll sell it. The money will be more than enough for us to start fresh. We've already talked about opening our own business, just like we planned in college." Joyce turned to Zachary with a dreamy look. "It's going to be perfect, babe." Victoria watched them in silence for a long moment. Then, suddenly, she laughed. It wasn't a laugh of amusement, nor was it filled with joy. It was something colder, something that made Zachary's smirk falter for just a second. Victoria shook her head slightly and looked them both in the eye. "The best laid schemes, oh mice and men," she began, her voice slow and deliberate. "Gang aftigly, and lias not, but grief and pain, for promise joy." Joyce frowned. "What?" Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Have you ever heard that poem by Robert Burns?" Joyce looked at Zachary, who shrugged. "No." Victoria nodded knowingly. "That's all right. You'll see it firsthand soon enough." Then she walked out. 2 days later, Aaron was in a car outside Joyce's office. I sat in my car, parked a block away from Joyce's office, sipping my coffee as I watched the morning unfold. The sun was barely up, but the day was already shaping up just the way I had planned. I glanced at my watch. Any second now. Inside the office building, a man in a dark suit stepped through the glass doors and made his way to the front desk. I knew him well, Philip, a process server I had hired. He was professional, efficient, and had a knack for theatrics when needed. A few minutes later, I saw him enter Joyce's office. I leaned back in my seat, letting the moment sink in. I wasn't there to see her face when he handed her the envelope, but I could imagine it vividly. That moment of confusion, followed by realization, followed by panic. I could almost hear her heartbeat quicken as she saw the words on the petition. Grounds for divorce, adultery. Philip would have smiled at her politely, the way he always did. "Are you Mrs. Joyce Peterson?" She would have nodded, probably distracted, probably thinking it was just some routine paperwork. And then, with that same polite smile, he would have handed her the manila envelope. "Have a nice day?" I smirked to myself, imagining the silence in that office as everyone around her watched. A small town like ours didn't let scandals slide. "Bye now," whispers. Update 2. Cheating wife wanted to divorce me for her ex, mutual friends supported her and betrayed me from now on. You are enemies, be careful, I told every one of them one by one, I wrecked them all, but I saved the best for my cheating wife. Would be spreading like wildfire. Inside that envelope weren't just divorce papers, it was evidence. Photos taken at the club, crystal clear, showing Joyce and Zach locked in each other's arms, lost in their own world. No room for denial, no room for excuses. I tapped my fingers against the steering wheel, watching as she hurried to her boss's office. Right on schedule. Brandon was an old friend, someone who had known Joyce almost as long as I had. But unlike me, he had never fallen for her charms. He had warned me once, years ago, to be careful with her. I had brushed it off. "You need the day off?" Brandon asked her, grinning like he had been waiting for this moment. She must have nodded, too stunned to speak. "Fine," he said, still smiling. A moment later, she left his office, her face pale, her steps unsteady. I pulled my phone from my pocket just as it started ringing. "Brandon," I answered, already knowing what he would say. "It's done. She's going home." I smiled, watching her figure retreat into the parking lot. "Please proceed as I have suggested," Brandon chuckled. "I know, buddy. Count on me." I pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe, one of those cozy little places with old wooden booths and the scent of fresh pastries hanging in the air. I needed something sweet to go with my victory. Walking up to the counter, I ordered a donut and a black coffee, then took a seat by the window, enjoying the peaceful hum of the place. The world outside moved as if nothing had happened. People went about their day, laughing, living their lives. But in another part of town, Joyce's world was crumbling. I took a slow bite of my donut, savoring the taste, when my phone vibrated on the table. I glanced at the screen. Joyce, I smirked, right on time. Lifting the phone to my ear, I didn't even get the chance to say hello before her voice came through. Shrill and furious. You son of a bitch, you're planning to ruin me. I stirred my coffee with a spoon, completely unbothered. Good morning to you too, Joyce. Cut the crap, Aaron. I just looked through the divorce papers. No mention of the house. No mention of the business. Where's my half? I took another sip of my coffee, letting the moment stretch. Then, in the calmest voice possible, I said, your half went down the drain the moment you opened your legs for a man other than your husband. Silence, just for a second. Then an outraged gasp. You bastard. I leaned back in my seat, watching a couple outside walk hand in hand, laughing about something. What a simple, beautiful thing loyalty was. If you want anything, talk to your lover, I continued smoothly. Maybe he can buy you that dream house you planned on stealing from me. Her breathing was ragged now, the anger practically radiating through the phone. I decided to twist the knife just a little more. And before you add anything else, let me remind you there's a restraining order against you and your boy toy. Don't ever come near my house or my business. I heard her inhale sharply, probably preparing another round of screaming, but I wasn't in the mood for it. Click. I ended the call, placed my phone on the table, and took another bite of my donut. Perfect timing. It still hadn't gone cold. The moment I hung up on Joyce, a deep sense of satisfaction settled over me. One battle won, but the war wasn't over. Now it was time for Paul and Linda to feel the weight of their betrayal. Before I get into that, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Aaron Peterson. I served in the Marines for 5 years, did my tour in Afghanistan, got stationed in Saudi for a while, and eventually retired. I came back home to run my father's business, a small but vital IT firm. We weren't some massive corporation, but in a town like ours, we didn't need to be. We were the backbone of every business in the area. Data management, IT hardware, networking support. If a business had computers, they needed us. And that meant everyone, including Paul and Linda. Paul ran a manufacturing business. Linda had an accounting firm. Both of them had been so quick to rally behind Joyce and her bastard lover. Laughing and drinking at that club like my marriage was just some joke. That night, they chose sides. Now, they would pay for it. The irony was almost poetic, because both of their IT contracts had expired 2 weeks ago. I had known this moment was coming, so I didn't bother renewing them. I let them think everything was fine, let them continue using our cloud services, our leased equipment, our support, never realizing that their entire infrastructure was hanging by a thread. And now that thread was about to snap. I went back to my office and fired up my laptop. I leaned back in my chair at the office, fingers steepled, watching the computer screen where the client contract dashboard was open. Paul's expired. Linda's expired. Their businesses had no idea that at any moment their data on our servers could be purged, their systems shut down. They had no backups, no redundancies. If I flipped the switch, their businesses would be hurled back into the dark ages, forced to go back to working on paper sheets. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. It was time to set things in motion. I picked up my phone and dialed Mark, my client manager. He picked up on the second ring. Aaron, what's up? He asked. I've got a task for you, I said, my tone even. I want emails sent to Paul and Linda. Formal notice, their contracts have expired, and they have exactly 2 days to back up their data. On the third day, we wipe everything and reclaim our leased equipment. There was a pause on the line, then Mark chuckled. Damn, you're not playing around, not anymore. I could hear him clicking away on his keyboard. All right, I'll draft something up. We keeping it professional, or do you want to twist the knife a little? I smirked. Professional, of course, but don't offer any contract renewals. Make it clear they're on their own now. Mark whistled. Got it. They're gonna panic when they realize they ignored all the renewal emails. I nodded to myself. That's the point. They assumed I'd roll over and extend their contracts just because we were friends. That friendship died the moment they supported my cheating wife. Mark chuckled. You know what's funny? We sent them multiple renewal reminders over the last few months. They either ignored them or let them rot in their spam folder. I smirked. Yeah, they probably assumed I'd renew their contracts automatically, like I owe them something. Well, they're in for a rude awakening. Mark humped. You think they'll come running to you? Begging for an extension? I chuckled darkly. Oh, they will. And when they do, I'll remind them exactly why they're in this mess. They backed the wrong people. The morning of the third day arrived exactly as I had expected. My phone buzzed incessantly, the screen lighting up with Paul's name. I let it ring a few times before answering, leaning back in my chair with a smirk. The second I picked up, Paul's voice exploded through the speaker. Aaron, what the hell is going on? Why have your people taken our computers? Where are our laptops? How the hell do I access my data? You can't do this. We have an agreement. I held the phone away from my ear, letting him rant like a lunatic. I could almost picture him, face red, pacing back and forth in his office, probably breaking into a sweat. When he finally ran out of steam, I spoke, my voice calm and measured. What contract, Paul? I don't recall any signed agreement between us. What are you talking about? He spat. Our contract expired weeks ago. There was no renewal. I let the words sink in before continuing. Also, my team sent multiple reminders, which you ignored. So now, it's only fair that I ignore you. And with that, I hung up. Not even 5 minutes later. Final update. Cheating wife wanted to divorce me for her ex. Mutual friends supported her and betrayed me from now on. You are enemies, be careful. I told every one of them one by one. I wrecked them all, but I saved the best for my cheating wife. My phone rang again. Linda, I sighed, already knowing how this was going to go. I answered, Aaron, are you really going to do this? She asked, her voice laced with panic. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I turned my attention to the monitor in front of me. Linda's data was all lined up on my system, neatly organized, waiting for a single command. I hovered my finger over the keyboard, then pressed enter. I watched as the files began to disappear. Then, I brought the phone back to my ear. Hold on, Linda, I said casually, enjoying the moment. I waited a few more seconds, watching the purge complete. Then I said, well, I just did. The ear-splitting shriek that followed nearly made me laugh. What have you done? She screamed. All the data is gone. My clients will kill me. I smiled. Then explained to them that you ignored the contract renewal with your IT service provider. And he purged all the data in a completely legal way. I paused for effect, then added, have a nice day, Linda. Then I hung up. Now that Paul and Linda were dealt with, that left me with Joyce and her bastard lover Zach. But I knew I had to be patient. My divorce had to be finalized first. Joyce tried to fight the terms in court, her lawyer making weak attempts to paint her as the victim. She wanted the house. She wanted a share of my so-called business. She wanted what she thought she was entitled to. Too bad for her. My lawyer was better. Your Honor, my lawyer began. We'd like to establish that the house in question is not a marital asset. It was purchased by my client before he even got married, and it remains in his name. Joyce's lawyer fidgeted. Joyce clenched her jaw. The judge nodded. Does the petitioner's counsel have any evidence to refute this? Her lawyer sighed. No, Your Honor. Strike one. Next, they tried to claim that since I owned a thriving IT business, Joyce was entitled to half. That was where things got interesting. My lawyer stood, straightened his suit, and turned to the judge with a smirk. Your Honor, my client does not own any business. He is merely an employee at his father's IT firm. The judge looked at me. Mr. Peterson, can you confirm your income? I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I receive a salary of just over $1,000 per month. Joyce's head snapped toward me. Her mouth fell open in shock. I kept my expression blank. Your Honor, I'd like to present my client's pay stubs for the last year as evidence, my lawyer continued, handing over the neatly prepared documents. As you can see, his income is significantly lower than the petitioner's. In fact, she makes more than he does. The judge glanced at the papers. Then at Joyce. Miss Peterson, based on this information, I find no grounds for your claim to any share of his income or assets. Strike two. Then came the best part. Furthermore, my lawyer added, flipping through another document. Given that my client earns substantially less than the petitioner and considering that she was the one who breached the marital contract through infidelity, we request spousal support to be paid to my client. Joyce practically leapt out of her seat. What? The judge banged the gavel. Order in the court. Joyce's lawyer scrambled. Your Honor, this is highly unusual. The judge cut him off. Ms. Peterson, given that your husband was the lower earning spouse and that the dissolution of this marriage was caused by your infidelity, I am awarding Mr. Peterson spousal support in the amount of $500 per month for a period of 2 years or until he remarries, whichever comes first. Joyce turned red. She clenched her fists. She looked like she wanted to scream, but in court she couldn't do a damn thing. Strike three. I barely held back my smile. As we left the courtroom, Joyce stormed up to me, her eyes blazing. You set this up. You manipulated everything. I shrugged. No, Joyce. I just let the truth do its work. She gritted her teeth. You think you won? I chuckled. Oh, I know I did. Then I walked away, already planning my next move. I knew one thing for sure. I was taking those 2 years. 3 months later, the divorce decree came in. I was legally free. Now for the final step. As soon as I left the courthouse, I called Brandon, Joyce's boss. He answered with a smile. I guess it's time, he said. I smiled and said, yep, finally free. So, drinks on you tonight. I smiled and said, no, I need to have a small dinner with Mr. Logan Peterson. He laughed and said, your uncle was the judge. Hell, man, you knew from the start that Joyce is screwed. I smiled and said, never give your enemies any chance to fight. You know who was her lawyer? Brandon asked. Who? It was Harry. You mean old Harry? Brandon asked. I said, yep. I screwed her, and I screwed her hard. Old Harry was my uncle from my mother's side. Small town, you see. Drinks are on me tomorrow night, I promise. I said, I am just preparing the papers for Joyce. She will be out by tomorrow evening. And as far as Zachary is concerned, I spoke to Mr. Patel and explained him everything. That guy was fuming from his ears when he heard that his employee was cheating with a married woman. By today evening, he will be fired without recommendation. Then I thanked Brandon and hung up. A week passed. On a quiet Wednesday evening, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Victoria stood there, her expression unreadable. Hey, Aaron, she said softly. Hey, Victoria, come in. I let her into the living room. She sat on the couch, smoothing out her skirt before looking up at me with a small smile. I'm not sure how to say this, but Joyce is a mess. I sat across from her, leaning back in my chair. Yeah, I said, my lips curling into a smirk. Victoria nodded. She's planning to leave town. I let out a small chuckle. Well, that's not surprising. She burned every bridge with everyone in town. Victoria tilted her head and smiled. No, Aaron, she didn't just burn bridges. She crossed the wrong one. I met her gaze, and for the first time in a while, I felt a genuine sense of satisfaction. I exhaled slowly. I'm not sorry for what I did. Victoria shook her head. You don't have to be. She deserved it. She took you for granted and ruined your marriage. I nodded. She did. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. Paul and Linda are getting divorced. That made me raise an eyebrow. Really? She nodded. They're blaming each other for the mess. Their business is in ruins. Clients have sued them for millions. I let out a low whistle. Millions they don't have. Victoria smirked. Exactly. I leaned back and crossed my arms. They deserved every bit of it. She hesitated before speaking again. And Zach, I tilted my head. What about him? Victoria sighed. He already left town. I wasn't shocked. That coward was bound to run eventually. 2 days ago, he had a big fight with Joyce. It got ugly. I stared at her, waiting for her to continue. He even slapped her. But then I didn't react or intervene. I just stood there, silent, and watched them. The only thing that ran through my mind was the contrast, how a woman, once pampered by the man who truly loved her, was now being abused by the man she threw it all away for. I exhaled slowly. Well, that's the consequence of the choices she made. Victoria studied me for a moment and stood up. I should go home now. I stood as well. Good luck, Victoria. She gave me one last smile. Goodbye, Aaron. And with that, she walked out the door. Life had a funny way of balancing itself out. After everything that had happened, I found myself with something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. I had no baggage weighing me down. No toxic people leeching off me. My house was quiet, but not in a lonely way. It was peaceful, and I finally had time to focus on the things I actually enjoyed. One of those things was getting myself a couple of German shepherds. I'd always wanted dogs, but Joyce never liked the idea. But then I realized I could not get dogs because my wife was a bitch. Well, Joyce wasn't here anymore, and I could do whatever the hell I wanted. I picked up 2 pups from a breeder a couple of towns over, brother and sister. I named them Titan and Luna. Titan was bold and protective. Always ready to jump into action, Luna was the clever one, observing everything before making a move. They became my shadow, following me everywhere, sleeping at the foot of my bed and making sure I was never truly alone with them by my side. My morning runs felt better. My house felt livelier in my mood. Well, let's just say they made me smile more than I had in years. Then there was Emily. I met her at the dog park. Well, Titan and Luna met her first. She was sitting on a bench, sipping coffee. While her own German shepherd, Rex, was trying to wrestle a stick twice his size. My 2 ran straight for him, and before I could call them back, they were already in a full-blown game of tug-of-war. Emily laughed, shaking her head. Looks like we have a little team forming. I smirked. Guess so. Sorry if they're bothering him. She waved a hand dismissively. Are you kidding? This is the most fun he's had all week. We ended up talking for over an hour, watching our dogs play. She had a warm, easygoing presence, smart, funny, confident. Nothing like the mess I'd been tangled up with before. There were no games, no manipulation, just good conversation and genuine smiles. Meeting her wasn't like getting struck by lightning. It was simpler than that. It was like finding a missing piece I didn't even realize was gone.